Hi, I'm Giselle.
And I'm Xana.
And together we are
The Strong Sunflowers. Hello, Strong Sunflowers. Welcome back to another week of our amazing podcast. We are so thankful you're here. We're going to be doing a Who's in Your Field series, which is very exciting. And it's all about therapy, y'all. So get ready. But before we get into all of it, you know the drill. So if you have not gone to all your socials at this point, we are now on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So like us, share our content, comment. We'd love to engage with you. If you haven't followed Los Girasoles Fuertes, if you want to get us not only in English, but in Spanish, go there too. We're there and on all the platforms. We'd love your support and we'd love to engage with you. Hey, even invite you on the podcast, which is what we've been doing lately, which we're going to incorporate into this episode, which is super exciting. So this week is Who's in Your Field? The lessons I've learned from therapy. So we would love to share, first off, what we've learned from our own personal experiences in therapy. We then went to social and asked our field what they've learned. So we have a few that just really stood out to us that we want to share with you. And then we have a special guest that G's going to tell you all about in a little bit. So G, if you want to kick off and share with the field, what were 2 or 3 things that you've learned from therapy thus far?
Hey, you guys. So I am new to this whole therapy thing. I just recently started going to therapy and I love it. 10 out of 10 recommend. And I started going to therapy because the connection with my mother has been kind of rocky for a couple of years now. And I wasn't understanding why that was. And it started to kind of pile together and put these pieces together that my mom's relationship with her mom is trash work. And my grandmother's relationship with her mother wasn't a good one either. So I really wanted to understand why was it that these women in my life didn't have a good relationship with each other. And to make sure, I just turned 27 this year. And I just truly wanted to make sure that whatever's going on in my lineage, I didn't pass it down, because I truly believe I am the black sheep of the family. And that's a good thing. I am the generational curse breaker. This is my moment. And I truly feel it in my bones. My ancestors are rooting for me. So I reached out to therapy to see what was really the problem. What was the cause? Because I definitely don't want to pass that on to my future kids. And, the best way that we can do that is to heal. And when I heal myself, which is something that my therapist taught me, when I heal myself, I am healing 7 generations before me and 7 generations after me. So I'm not just doing this for myself, I'm doing this for my future family and lineage. But one of the things that really hit me that she talked about was the importance of being ready as much as you can to have a child. Because before, I just thought yeah, I need to have a child that I can pay for and emotionally be there. And of course, have a stable relationship and all that stuff. But when we got into our session, we talked about the importance of having stable mind. Again, all the pillars of being a strong ass sunflower: self-love, self-care, setting boundaries, being at peace with yourself, truly knowing yourself, and just loving who you are. When we don't have that, we talked about how all that energy is transmitted to the fetus. Energy is transmitted. So we transmit all this energy, which can either be depression, anxiety, not really wanting to be a parent, all those emotions, especially when you really feel like you're not ready, you can pass that on to your child. Even the way that the child was conceived, were you in love with your partner? Was it like a quickie and that was that? Was it someone that you didn't really like a one night stand? All those things, the way that you create life is really transmitted into that soul that you have in your uterus and that you're creating. So it truly made me think of like, damn, there's so much more to being a parent and so much more to creating life. It's truly a gift. It's truly a gift to be able to bring life into this world. And it really made me look at things in a different way because I started to think of my own story with my mom and understanding her side of it. Because, yes, the 5-year-old in me still has struggles with that, but the 27-year-old Giselle understands. Like, my mom was 19 when she had me. She was a kid herself. She didn't know. She didn't know how to be a parent. She was a kid. She was still trying to figure out herself. And the way that I came to the world, it was with having those thoughts. Um, my mom did tell me that she has had like multiple abortions before me. So, understanding that mindset of where she was in life. Again, she's in communist Cuba. She's not ready to be a mother. She doesn't know how she's going to take care of me. And it's not like she doesn't love me. It was just that it was the wrong time in her life. And understanding that my mother had to take a pause to bring me into this world. And that was a sacrifice she didn't have to make, but she still made. So that was a big thing that therapy taught me. Just understanding more the relationship about my mom's story and how it affects mine and how I want to move on in the future to my future kids. Another big thing that I learned from therapy is that people are truly a mirror of you. People are a mirror of your flaws, the things that you're scared of, your insecurities. They are a mirror to you. One of the biggest things that I understood that with was me getting in my situationship after my marriage, and the first person I ever talked to after my divorce. And I felt, now I know, like they were not emotionally ready to be in a relationship. That's not what they wanted. And I still pursued that relationship because deep down within me, I hadn't done the work after my marriage to be ready and emotionally available to be in a relationship. So that's what I pursued. He was a mirror of me. And that happens so much in all aspects of our life with the people that we have. And we're like, what the hell? Why the hell is this person in my life? But you have to ask yourself, like, these people are in my life for a reason, and they are a mirror and a reflection of me. What are they trying to teach me about me that I need to work on? So that's number 2. That was really big. And then last but not least, this was actually this therapist, and I had a therapist before her. Actually, it was not even a therapist. Quick story. I went to Key West with my friend Janet. Hey, Janet. And we decided to go get like a tarot card reading and like go to talk to a psyche. And I'm like, yeah, like that's always been on my bucket list and I always wanted to do it. So we're in Key West and we're with the psyche in her little shop. And one of the things that she tells me is, first of all, the marriage or relationship that you were in wasn't the one that you were supposed to, and now your life is getting back in line and its purpose. And I'm like, okay, weird. How do you know my life? And the second thing she tells me is that you need to really learn how to regulate your emotions. And she told me that, and my therapist still tells me that. Like, I'm very 0 to 100. It's either a hell no or a hell yes. And that's very hard for me emotionally because my lows are low, low. And my highs are high. Like my joy is with every cell in my body. But so is my lows. When I am depressed, I am depressed. Uh, it's really hard to put into words. But she was just telling me, like, you really have to learn how to find the more regulate that more in your life, because life is gonna, there's gonna be lows and highs, but there's no need for it to be so low that it's like unbearable, you know um and that's something I'm still working on. I'm still working on understanding that there's duality, that I can be happy and still be unhappy about certain things in my life, that I can be sad, but it doesn't have to be a sadness that consumes me. I'm a Scorpio. I like dark and mysterious, but sometimes the darkness takes me over and I'm like, what the hell? I'm also light. I am positivity. I am vibrant. I am like, my aura is, it's just amazing. So like I have to remind myself of that. And this podcast right here really helps me take me out from that really dark places that I'm at zero. And I'm like, wow, look what we have created. Like we help people, we motivate people. You're never at zero. You're always at some kind of percent. So, but Xana, what has your therapist taught you?
I've been doing therapy now. I think I started in the pandemic. I think when a lot of people were like, wait a minute, this tornado of life has come to a standstill. And what am I actually doing? And so there was a benefit through work where I could get free sessions. And I had never, as a manager and leader, I have, many of times recommended them to my employees, but never actually did it myself. And I was going through a faith crisis and kind of transitioning out of organized religion, and had been married 10 years and have 4 kids and a lot of life change, and didn't have the, cookie cutter, what they sell on TV is not what people experience. And everybody kind of has the ups and downs of life, but we're not really given the resources to work through those emotional traumas that we may have. And so I started and, had to do the whole thing, like going back into childhood. But then, like, when my grandma passed away, there was a space where, like, I could work through that instead of like just holding it down. And, what I think is, as little kids, we're often taught is like, stop crying, stop whining, at least in my family, it was like bad to cry. And I've learned through therapy and through reading books that that's just a way for us to kind of go through a stress cycle. And it's important to talk through things, because if you don't, your body holds on to it. Like Queen Brene says, it masticizes. Emotions don't just go away. If you don't deal with them, they turn into something else. They turn into sickness and stress and anxiety and depression. And so being able to kind of have that language and learn that has been really, really helpful. But if I had to choose like 2 to 3 like specific lessons that I've learned from my therapist, shout out to Lindley, hey Queen, if you're listening, is first off, like giving yourself grace. I think each and every one of us tends to be the worst critic. If G did something where she messed up on the podcast or said X, Y, and Z, I'd be the first to be like, it's no big deal, G, like chill out. But when I do it, it's like, oh, you stupid idiot. Like, what are you thinking? Right. And so she's really taught me to be more of a friend to myself and have a positive inner voice, and stop being so critical. And I think in another way, not just my inner voice, but like my outer appearance. Like, I was an athlete in college. I have been pretty fit my entire life. And when I had my twins, my body, like, it didn't snap back like it did after my other pregnancies. And so she, we often talk about, how I'm feeling mentally, but also physically. And she's my first advocate that's like, girl, you had 4 children that came out of your body. Like, you're not going to look like you do when you're 19. But guess what? That's okay. That's okay. This is the new and improved Xana. This is the almost 40 Xana. And you can find the healthiest version of yourself, but you can't compare 40-year-old Xana to 19-year-old Xana, because you're different. It's a different chapter. I think another lesson, and it's my favorite, and I use it often and I share it often with people, is worry, plan, move on. And so I deal with like a lot of anxiety. I am a forward thinker. I tend to have like the vision of what's possible. But sometimes when you live in the future too much, you get really anxious and you worry and you fear what could happen wrong. G has caught me in several moments where she's like, why are you like all the way there? Like, why do you see like this negative vision of what could be like just be present. And so worry, plan, move on is this exercise that my therapist taught me, where if she said that if you're feeling anxious, first ask yourself, can I control this? Like, why am I worried? Can I control this? If you can control it, then plan. do something, right? Come up with a way to get around the obstacle, execute it, and then guess what? You get to move on because you dealt with it. But if you can't plan it, meaning it's outside of your control, you still need to move on because there's nothing you can do, right? You just have to accept it and move on. So that's been a really helpful exercise for me. And then lastly, this actually came from my physical therapist, which I still consider therapy because that's like going all in on, the physical side of your body and what you're holding on to and trying to kind of work them out through physical movement. And I have been planning, I've been training for this marathon the last in 2022 over the year. And I would continuously out loud kind of say just like smart ass things. Like, who in their right mind thinks this mom bod's going to be able to run this marathon? Like, what am I thinking? I'm so crazy, right? And he like looked at me in my eyes and he said, "Stop saying you have a mom bod. Like, what's wrong with having a mom bod? You say it like it's such a negative thing, and you keep talking about your age. Like, your age isn't a reason to not try or to make fun of yourself. Like, you can do anything. It all starts with your mindset. And if you keep talking to yourself like, oh, this stupid mom bod 40-year-old, like, you're not going to be able to achieve the greatness that you're capable of. So if you believe you can do it and you say that you can do it, you're going to do it. In that moment where he like opened up and shared that like he had gone on his own growth journey in regards to losing weight. He had been 100 pounds overweight and now is like the leanest, strongest dude, helping other people kind of get into their best physical form. It was just motivating to me, right? Where he listened to me, he called me on my negative like self-talk, and then he shared a personal story about how he was able to achieve his personal goals around his physical fitness. It really motivated me to kind of change the way that I talk to myself. So those are 3 little nuggets that I've learned thus far. And no, I can't encourage you more. Like, if you haven't looked into therapy, there's so much access now too. Like, it can be expensive if you don't have health insurance, but there's other services out there. I personally use BetterHelp, which I love. My son, I signed him up for Sondermind, which is another like virtual therapy type thing. And I'm a huge advocate and promoter of both of those services. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, G.
And so many people, when you talk to them about what they've learned in therapy, Xana took a field in our took a inventory in our field and asked around, like, what have people learned in therapy? And from the responses that we're actually going to share with you today, a lot of them align with the 5 tips of becoming a strong ass sunflower. Woo woo! I'm telling you, our pillars are on point. Like, these pillars that literally build our life are on point. But Xana, what are 2 of the things that someone said to you?
There are a couple. Okay, so first off, one that aligns with mine, which is you're never too old to do something. As long as you have breath in your lungs, you can work toward a goal. Hell yeah, right? Like, I love when I see those things on the internet where it talks about certain people that we see as these big wigs, like Oprah. Like, she got fired at 23, right? She didn't reach her greatness until she was like late 20s, 30s, almost 40s. And now she's in her 60s, almost 70s, and is just killing it and inspiring so many people, right? So age is but a number. So I love that was a lesson. And then another one that really stood out to me was learning the difference between being assertive and aggressive. Initially, this person thought it was the same, that meant like you being assertive and or aggressive was bad, it was selfish, and they thought that like being passive was the Christian thing to do. So their therapist really helped them realize that they were just being a doormat and having people walk all over them, and she needed to learn how to be more assertive, right? And I just love that, right? Assertiveness is what I consider the harvest, right? It's where you're standing up for your rights and the rights of other people. And that's not bad. And that's not selfish. That's actually how we should be. We need to set boundaries. So I love those two lessons, but I know you're going to share the other two, right, G?
Yes, ma'am. And just right there, you said tip number 5 to becoming a strong sunflower, and tip number 2, setting boundaries and saying no. So, right there, but one of the things that someone shared was to know your self worth. And if someone makes you feel less, they don't deserve to be in your life. And that's tip number 1 right there. Self-love, knowing your self-love, knowing your self-worth. And when you like the two go hand in hand, when you know who you are and you love yourself, you literally tolerate less shit from people. Like there's just no room for it. You know, if you're going to be negative in my life, when I myself am not negative to me, like you gotta go. You gotta bounce that ass out of here. One of the episodes that we're super excited to share with you, and it's gonna launch more later in March, is about body shaming in all the cultures. Cause that is really a pandemic that goes around not only in Hispanic culture, but Asian culture, American culture, all the cultures, you know, and how that affects our self love and so forth. Like our bodies, and just even listening to Santa's story about, I have a mom bod. By the way, she still says this sometimes, and I'm like, I gotta correct her. I'm like, you just have a body, okay, just a body. um, but how that affects our self worth. Like our worth is our body, but after we have children, it changes, and it changes into just like, oh my gosh, I love the seed. It's so beautiful and small. Well, the seed's going to grow. The seed is going to become maybe this huge stem and beautiful sunflower, but maybe you're going to be like, what the heck? I missed the seed, but that's not you anymore. You know, you have to, again, learning to enjoy each aspect of your life and the chapter that you're in. Because sometimes I've talked about this before. Sometimes I'm like, I want the kids and the husband and all the stuff. And Santa's in that chapter right now. And I feel like looking from the outside perspective, we're like, oh my gosh, like I want that chapter. And she's like, girl, sometimes I miss your chapter, you know? And sometimes we just want to skip chapters. Like, I want to be like doing what you're doing. And then I'm like, well, I want to be doing what you're doing. But we just have to be present. And then now it's like, you had your 27 or 19-year-old Santa moment, you know? And then whenever, maybe I'll have kids when I'm 35, 37, who knows? But then that will be the chapter that I'm in. So that's another thing I'm trying to like be more present in, just being present in my chapter. And then like borrowing Santa's kids when I want a little sneak peek of what's to come. And number 2 that they send us.
You're making me want to sing some Coldplay.
Do it.
No, when you were talking, I was like, man, this is making me think of that Coldplay song where it's like, nobody said it was easy. Nobody said it would be so hard. Let's go back to the start. You can't go back to the start. That chapter has passed. You can appreciate it. You can learn from it. You can have nostalgia from it, but the only way to be is in the present, baby. It's a gift. So be present. Don't go back. You can go back to reminisce, right? But don't get stuck there. And you can go forward to like think vision and goals and where you can go, but don't get stuck there. Come back to the present and just be you and live your life and be the best version of yourself that you possibly can be.
Yeah, definitely. And it goes hand in hand with this next lesson that they send you. Also, you can love people from afar. You can forgive and forget, but your well-being, but that doesn't mean you must hang out with that person that you have issues with. And that applies also like just when we reminisce in the past. When you started singing that song, it reminded me of my friend Brendan Barnes. He passed away in 2015, I believe. He was only 15 years old and he got ran over by a car. But like we sung that song in his funeral, and every time I hear it, it reminds me of him. And you know, we It can be applied both ways because it's like, nobody said it was easy. Like, I know being a mom of 4 and having a husband and working full time and following your goals and your dreams is not easy, but also it's like they didn't say it was gonna be this hard. Like, mom guilt and all that stuff. So I can see that in my future, but I'm like, I'm just glad that I have people in my field to like show me the way and show me like, hey, it's not all beautiful and sunflowers over here. Okay. We have our rainy days too, and we have our harvest, but we continue to plant. So that's all that matters. Um, but yeah, this reminded me of when I went to Hawaii. I watched Eat, Pray, Love. If you haven't seen Eat, Pray, Love, you need to see it. It's a classic. It's iconic. I mean, just as iconic as Pretty Woman. Like, I love her. I love her. All her movies, go watch it. But in the movie, she talks about again, she's just going through this divorce, and you feel guilt, you feel this love, this reminiscing of the past and what was. And her coach or her mentor, her butterfly, was just like, it's okay to feel those emotions. You can feel that. You can reminisce, you can miss, you can want that. Feel it, feel those emotions, and then let it go. Tell them thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of my life, for being a part of my story, for being a part of that chapter. I thank it, and then let it go. Let it go. But we're super excited to have this Who's in Your Field episode. And today we're going to jump into our interview with Vicky. Oh my gosh. Every time I hear Vicky, if you haven't seen Fairy Godparents, like Chip Skylar, you already know, icky Vicky, you're so icky with the sound of your voice, make the boss go, mm. Um, but yes, we are interviewing Vicky, and she's a psychotherapist and coach. And we found her on the internet. And we're super excited to have her in our field and learn a little bit about what people are coming her for help, and what are the lessons that she's teaching the most. So we'll jump into that interview right now. Hey y'all, we are back in the field, and today we have Vicky here with us, and she's going to tell us a little bit about psychotherapy and coaching and how she's helping people through therapy to live their very best life. And what lessons does she teach on a regular basis? Because I feel like a lot I know we always think it's like, "Oh, it's just us. I'm going through this by myself." No, there's like thousands of people going through the same thing that you're going through. So,
Perfect.
Vicky Queen, introduce yourself to the field.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me. I'm Vicky. I'm a psychotherapist and a coach, and I am in Atlanta, Georgia. Specialize in working with people pleasers and perfectionists. And outside of my work, I try to push myself, but not in too hard of, kind of critical ways. So I do CrossFit. I train I train my Australian Shepherd. I train him very poorly, but we do some stuff together, agility out in the backyard. And I like to pretend that I am a professional nature photographer with my phone. So I'm all the time like irritating the hell out of my husband and my dogs when we go on hikes, because I'm like, wait a second, there's another fern. I have to take a picture of this fern. So I like to do that stuff, but I'm also very much of an introvert and like to be under a weighted blanket and watching Netflix when the switch is off, the switch is off.
Love it, Vicky. Oh my gosh. I'm all about that photography life too. I would love to know, you know, with psychotherapy, you mentioned that it's specific to people pleasers, which is really interesting to me because I feel like I'm still kind of overcoming my shortcomings when it comes to people pleasing, because that's how I was kind of raised to be. And then perfectionists. So how do you help them? Like what specific, tactics do you use to help this specific group of people? And I would like to know a little origin story too, before we get into like the 3 things you taught people. Like, why did you get into therapy? What calls you to do this work?
Well, yes. So I think most therapists get into therapy, and this is me as well, so I'm not just making this a general answer, because we went through some stuff and there was some part of our personality that was sort of like, I gotta understand this. Like, why did this happen? Or um, how come I'm really sensitive? Like you might hear about highly sensitive people, HSPs, more so than you have before, but being a feeler, being a person that likes to figure things out, but not necessarily in such a intellectual, mechanical way, more in an emotional, mental way, has really brought me to the field. So I am the youngest of three siblings by 10 and 13 years. So I was pretty much an only child with two sets of parents, if you will. And because I'm so far from my brother and sister with age range, I had a completely different experience in my family. And I always felt like an outsider. And that was always hard. So I was always trying to figure out, how do I fit in? How do I make this group of people embrace me? Not that they were horrible people at all. Um, I just always felt like kind of outside the mothership, if you will, and didn't really know what I was doing wrong or why I didn't feel a part of. So it just sort of set me off on a journey of being really a spiritual seeker, honestly. Like, what's happening inside? Why do I feel so much anxiety? Really was my factory setting as a kid. So it was just trying to figure that out and then trying to belong, which put me into people pleasing and perfectionism myself.
But that's amazing. I feel like definitely having that anxiety of maybe trying again, that perfectionist. You want to be perfect for your parents. You at least from like from my point of view, wanting to be perfect for my parents, wanting to be the daughter that my mom always wanted because she always compared me to like, why are you not like this girl's daughter? And why are you not like this other daughter? You know, and I'm like, okay, I gotta do better. I need to do better. So that really created anxiety. And I realized just recently that I really don't like when I disappoint people. It really causes me to bring like this childhood anxiety up. I recently just got fired from my job and I have never been fired from my job. So that actually brought anxiety in the fact that like, okay, Giselle, you weren't good enough for like, what did you do wrong? Even though I didn't do anything wrong. And 27-year-old Giselle knows that. But like 5-year-old Giselle is like, oh my gosh, the big boss was upset. And 27 Giselle is like, you're fine. So I actually talked to my therapist about that and I had to hold myself. I'm like, she's like, sometimes you have to hold the 5-year-old Giselle and be like, you're fine. You're okay. You did nothing wrong. You are perfect the way you are. So I would love to know like the the not the number one, well maybe, but one of the three things that people come to you most about, and how do you help them kind of like pass that hurdle in their life?
Yeah, I think that worry is a number one. People are caught, and a lot of people are caught in anxiety, and that's how most people end up finding me. Sort of the high functioning, insecure folks that end up, because they're pleasers and perfectionists, they end up rising in the ranks at their company, or just eventually having like a completely full schedule because they do something so well. They make the cupcakes for the soccer team so well that they just, oh, she'll keep doing it. And they're they're overwhelmed, basically. And so they worry about disappointing people. They worry about um, not living up to some kind of standard, which is usually very subjective. Depends on who you're talking to, what time of day, whether they've had a good night's sleep and have had lunch yet. So they come in with worry. You know, I spend so much time worrying about whether someone likes me, whether I've upset someone, whether I'm going to get invited to the girls' night out or something like that, right? So their minds and their emotions, I call it the roundabout. They never get off the roundabout. They just drive and drive and drive. So they can't enjoy really what they've signed up for, or say no to something and live with it. Guilt is a big one that comes with worry. So those are, I would say, worry and anxiety is the top kicker that brings people in.
How are you helping them get off the roundabout?
So I am a internal family systems practitioner. I don't know if you guys have heard about internal family systems. It's becoming more popular. Short term is short name for it is IFS. So I use internal family systems and mindfulness as ways to help people sort of slow down so that they can look inside, get an idea of like, what are my thoughts that are leading to these worries? What is the feeling of anxiety that throws me out of balance and I get caught in? And I help them slow down and kind of, I think about it as like you look under the hood of a car and there's a lot of stuff going on, thoughts, feelings, sensations in the body. And we start to identify the different parts of your personality, which is internal family systems, and also the way that those thoughts, feelings, and sensations, mindfulness, show up and kind of have a tendency to lead us around instead of us feeling like we are in charge. So I help people, what I call, map out their system. So we actually draw it out and say, this is how you do your life. You try to make people happy. You keep your house tidy and organized. You think a lot. We just come up with the parts of their personality that they rely on the most to help them manage and get through their days. And when they help them do that, they're able to kind of step back from all the busyness of actually being in the all the commitments they've made or in the worry in their mind. They're actually able to step back and we're like, look, all this stuff under the hood of the car, together it makes the car run. So everything here is needed and necessary. It's just you're burning oil too much or something like that. Like you're using one part of your personality a little too much, and that might be the people pleaser. You're saying yes too many times. So I help them map out the parts of their personality and we get to know them, almost like getting to know people, the people inside of us. And that really helps them separate from what they're doing. And then they can get a clearer perspective of themselves.
So, Vicky, I love that you're using vehicle analogies because I think of my own car right now and how there's a couple lights on. I'm embarrassed to say, I don't know what they mean. And I should probably figure out what they mean. But how often do we have emotions that come up and we just suppress them and ignore them instead of like pulling over or going to a mechanic and saying, what's this light mean? Oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z to the car to make sure that it's running properly. Great. Like, I even have like a chip in my windshield that's splintered. It was like a little pebble that, hit the windshield on the way to work and it splintered. And I've been too busy to get the windshield fixed. And now there's just this big crack along the front of it. We need to take care of ourselves. And therapy is the way to go. And I'm not cheating, like a personality map, and you help your patient kind of fall in love with themselves again, or again, maybe they've never have, right? So I think that's really beautiful. And I'd love to talk offline more to better understand myself personally, because I think that I have been the kind of person that's just kind of put band-aids on things or ignored things and just continued saying yes and doing and doing and doing and doing, that there's still portions of myself that I don't quite understand. Though I do believe that this is a life journey. I don't think that you can always just know yourself 100%. And I think we evolve and we change based on our life experience. But the way that you worded that was just beautiful. So it's definitely intrigued me. Um, I want to go on to my final question, which is, what are the top 3 kind of most common pieces of advice that you share, or even that you're most excited to share, where you see that light bulb, switch in somebody's eyes where they're like, oh my gosh, I get perspective on that.
Yeah, well, it goes back to internal family systems, really. It's when we work on what parts of your personality you've developed to handle, like, say, with people pleasing and perfectionism, mostly it's criticism, rejection, and judgment, right? So all of us are trying to decrease any of that in our lives. But for a people pleaser and a perfectionist, we're trying to do things right. I call it being polite and right. Like, we get caught in those two words, polite and right. And when we do the parts mapping with my clients, and they actually see, it's not abstract anymore. It's not just this reactive, um, invisible force that takes over when somebody's standing in front of them and asking them if they can do something, and they're like, I know I want to say no. I know I want to say no, but then they say yes. When we actually let them see, like, this is how you operate. This is your operating system. This is the book of you, right? These are your personality parts. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, and it's weird because it's like a variation of the same sentence, which is, I never thought about it that way. I've never seen myself in that way. And so when that happens, I kind of like jokingly say, like, I let the confetti cannon out. Like, I'm just like, yes, because perspective is everything. And if you unblend from your unconsciousness and the things that you do habitually, just to, like, your defense mechanisms, right, if you will, when you unblend from those and step back and you can begin to observe yourself, because once like, oh, I have a people pleaser part. I'm not just a person who can't say no. So once you have that awareness, it changes things, and you can build on that awareness. Like, one of the other things I then do is teach mindful self-compassion, because now that you know your pattern, we don't want you to beat yourself up for having developed that pattern. It got you through a lot, and you're here because of it. We can tweak it. We can ask parts of your personality to relax a little, right? And not, another car analogy, jump in the driver's seat and take you, down a road you don't want to go on. But I really love how internal family systems and mindfulness work together. So I would say the first thing that I love teaching people, and that is changing, like life changing for people, is helping them understand that they are not their behaviors, thoughts, or feelings, and then helping them learn how to be nice to themselves, curious and kind to themselves with what they find.
Vicky, you are speaking our language. These are literally the 5 pillars of becoming a strong ass sunflower, you know? Yes, yes. Number 1 and foremost is self-love, and knowing the difference between self-love and self-care. Because a lot of people think they're doing self-love, but they're doing very harmful things to themselves and speaking very unkindly of themselves. And then tip number 2 is saying no and setting boundaries. So you're getting like deeper into these pillars. It's like, why can't I set those boundaries? Why do I constantly say no? And how can I go from always having to say no to being able to give myself space to say hell yes, to be able to say more hell yeses? Because I have all these no's here that I really, really want to say no to, but I keep saying yes. And that's not giving me enough room to actually thrive in my passions and what I really want to do with my life. So everything you're saying, it's like strong sunflower analogy. We're like, yes, Vicky, yes, yes. And I love how it goes deeper, because Therapy, man, therapy. Just recently, again, with me getting fired from my job and everything going on, after talking to my therapist, I realized that characteristic flaw of myself, that light in my car that I just leave on all the time too, of like, usually when something happens, I automatically go 0 to 100. Like, "Oh, they never cared about me. They never were my friends. I was never important to them." But that's not true. I'm only saying that to myself because I'm trying to protect my feelings and my emotions. So learning that characteristic flaw and being like, okay, Giselle, these people did love you. They did care about you, but that was this part of your life. And now you're in this part. That doesn't mean that they didn't love you in that moment, but you're just in a different chapter. And that's okay. And you don't have, there can be that duality of like, yes, I loved you in this chapter, but in this one, it's just, we're in different spaces. Ah, and it's hard. It's hard out here. But I love how you go deeper into those, like, why is this part of my character? And how can I either change it or like emphasize it? Because sometimes we do love some certain parts of ourselves that are kind of dimmed. And like maybe our tires need some air. So I love that. I love everything you have going on, Vicky.
I'm going to pick up on the light that's dimmed because I do believe, and also the hell yes. So I want to come back to the hell yes, because that's the kind of yes you want to say. Actually, I'll just say that right now. That was all I was going to say about it. It's like if you want to say yes, it needs to have a hell in front of it because it has to like fit for where you are. But I do think about the clouds in front of the sun, analogy or metaphor of the sun is still there, it's just covered up. So if we can help some of these parts of us that have been kind of defensive and trying to protect us so much, if we can help them kind of relax back, it's kind of like the clouds move a little bit, and they're always there. They can come and sort of dim your light, but there is that part of you that is wise and authentic and in internal family systems, it's C words, but I think you'll like them. It's calm, courageous, centered, creative, curious, compassionate, confident. So it's like those are the elements of the sun, and those protective strategies get in front of it, like the clouds. And the sun's always there. It's just you have to work with the clouds and spend some time not pointing your finger at the clouds, being like, "Why are you here? That's not okay." Sometimes it's good, but you don't need to protect yourself all the time in every situation.
I'm having mind blown moments over here. You're really making me sit with myself. So before G gets into her famous mic drop moment, Vicky, I'd love for you to tell the field, like, do you have a website? Do you have a podcast? We'd really love to, if people are loving what they're hearing like we are, I'm sure they want to be able to follow you post this interview. So let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, sure. So my coaching practice is called Power to the Pleasers. And I have a podcast of the same name. So Power to the Pleasers. And that's the website. I stuck with the general theme there. I didn't want to confuse anybody. So Power to the Pleasers. Same thing on Instagram. There's just a couple of dot periods between power to and the. But yeah, so that's where I live. I live in several different areas, YouTube as well, and I'm gonna try to show up on YouTube a little bit more this year.
I love that for you because we're trying to show up too. It's hard out here. It's hard when you're like the director, the creative mind, the editor, the advertisement, the work, the everything. You are just everything. And we're trying to get it together between this therapy, healing my childhood trauma and my now trauma, my later trauma. It's hard out here. But like Z said, usually we love people that are on the pod to finish off with giving some advice that whoever's listening in our field to this episode, if they don't listen to anything else, they really need to listen to this. Like, what do you want them to take away from this episode, if anything at all?
There's a couple of things coming up. One is you can change. You can make changes, and even changes that you feel like or that look like they're monumental. Habits that you've had for years, right? Things that are in the grooves in your brain that you just don't think like I could ever make a difference with this. Like I could never forgive that person. I could never find the strength to say no, stand up for myself. I really believe that personally for me, I have moved some mountains with internal family systems and mindfulness. When I first heard about both of these things, I felt like somebody had given me a playbook for life. Like, this is how you do life. If you want to feel a little bit more in control, which we all do, this is how you do it. You get to know yourself. And so I would just say nothing is ever set in stone. It really can be moved. It might be centimeter by centimeter, but once you start to get to know who you are and how to work with yourself instead of fight against yourself and try to push yourself to be different, you can step into who you know you are. And for me, it's just been, how do you be your authentic self and get, find fulfilling relationships by you being you?